Hi, with 2001 in full swing after the last video, let's see what else the year had to offer to Windows gamers. Arcanum of Steamworks and Magick Obscura is a top-down isometric role-playing and easily one of the best and most interesting games of the entire year. Many of the folks who worked on earlier Fallouts were involved in creation of Arcanum, and that influence is more than prominent throughout everything that the game is made out of. From character creation through quests and entire quest lines, multiple solutions to many problems and even combat. Basically, everything that made Fallout great, short of its post-apocalyptic setting, is here and as good as it could be in 2001. In fact, I may be referencing Fallout here a lot today, but when talking about a game that's borderline genius, it's only natural comparing it to the one that was of equally high quality. While on the face value the world of Arcanum is entirely different to the retro-futuristic atom-fueled take on the 1960s of Fallout, there are some similarities between them. It is also a mixture of few entirely different concepts, namely fantasy-based magic and races, rapid progression and innovation rooted in steampunk technology, along with Victorian English setting and overall world themes. It sounds like an explosive concoction that should never work, and yet not only it does, but also oh so well. And it's visible all throughout, even from the very moment when you create your character and have to settle on either going for the magic or tech, as these two are mutually exclusive. Sure, you can add different characters to your party, but each of them leans towards one or another. It's an interesting duality of inner conflict between traditional values and progress, and one that the game allows you to explore while playing at your own pace. It also offers different solutions to different situations depending on that choice, and it's something that will influence your entire adventure. Same as Fallout, Arcanum is very big, nearly entirely open to explore from when you start playing, and open-ended, letting you follow the plot of it as it unveils, but also to a certain degree craft your own story and adventures, by role-playing to your heart's desire. The morale system is bugged, and you can be anywhere on the good/evil spectrum, changing the world and people around you and seeing the outcome of these changes in real time. In short, you can be whomever you'd like to be, but you'll need to be ready to face the potential consequences of your actions and choices. But freedom aside, the story, while starting off a bit vague, is excellent, suspenseful, full of twists and turns, and difficult moral, philosophical and social choices, after making of which you'll often wonder what if, and worry if the ones that you've made are really the right ones. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you make the game that unknowingly gets you so involved in it that you begin to care. Still, even with plethora of skills to level up and then use in countless in-game situations, characters you can make your avatar become, alignments to pick for it, and underlying duality of the entire world of Arcanum, it's not a perfect game. You can replay it near infinitely, playing as entirely different characters each time, crafting completely unique experiences, and have fun for hours on end, but it's clear that it could take a couple of extra months or so of QA. The balancing is not its strongest suit, and certain character builds are noticeably better than the others, though arguably that particular imbalance kinda reflects the real life perfectly. And from that point of view, it's not a mistake in video game design at all. It's the years of gaming that programmed us to expect that all main possible character builds will always be equally as viable in completing the narrative stories. So, it may not be the issue with Arcanum itself, but with us, gamers. And while perhaps it's not good that we've grown comfortable expecting this fake balance, but it is what it is, and at their release it was one of the main things people complained about. Additionally, some quests, not many but a few, feel a bit rushed, and there's one I believe that is just straight up unfinished and you can't complete it. It doesn't stop you from going through this entire gigantic and super fun adventure, but it makes Arcanum feel a bit unpolished. There are three types of combat in Arcanum: real-time, semi-turn-based and turn-based. But I've never touched any other than turns, as most of my longtime viewers could easily guess before I even mention it here, so I can't personally vouch for the others. Turns, however, are fantastic and work same way they did in Fallout. Arcanum's presentation is a little bit of a mixed bag, as while the graphics are functional and on a similar level to the post-apocalyptic classic I keep mentioning in every second sentence here, they're hardly of 2001's quality. They don't get in the way or look fugly, not what I'm saying here whatsoever, they're just a bit lacking. Sounds and music, however, especially the latter, are fantastic, and fit to the on-screen action perfectly. Story-wise, you're a guest aboard a luxury Zeppelin IFS Zephyr's maiden voyage from Caldon in the Kingdom of Arland to Tarant, one of the most technologically advanced and science-focused cities in the entire unified kingdom. The ideal and peaceful flight is interrupted by the unexpected attack of two monoplanes, however, and they shoot it down. There are only two survivors of the Zeppelin's crash, an old gnome who's mortally wounded, and you. and just before he dies, he gives you a mysterious silver ring and tells you to find the boy, whatever that may mean. Perhaps it's Beyoncé's next big single hit, Find the Boy, and you're after the raw recordings. Virgil, a sole witness to the crash, seeing how you've escaped death unscathed, proclaims you the living one, a reincarnation of the ancient deity, and offers to follow you wherever the life may take you. And this is where your long and incredibly fun adventure begins. If Arcanum ever falls in your lap and you've not had a chance to experience it before, make sure to fix it. Planet of the Apes is a third-person action-adventure game that released very close to the movie remake, yet it shares literally nothing with it story-wise whatsoever. Well, other than the title, setting and super funky horse-riding monkeys. Apes, and let's not get overly focused on the horses either. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that the game is closer to the original film and the book it was based on than current at the time box flop over release. You play as Ulysses, a US astronaut who among 3 similar others is sent into deep space on a mission of exploration. Mission that naturally does not end the way it was supposed to, because if it did, we'd not had a game, at least not this one, and we'd be playing something else. Maybe even Arcanum, which, truth be told, is a much better game. So your ship crash lands on a mysterious alien planet, and as the game starts, you're captured by the apes, the main and highest in the local food chain inhabitants of the planet, and are held in a cell in a medical research center, awaiting gruesome and most likely painful experiments that will no doubt soon be performed on you. And you've seen the movies, you've read the books, so you know exactly what aliens do to humans when they capture them. They prod, they pinch and pick, and a nod finger up your bum is nothing particularly unusual in these contacts of the whichever it is kind. All naturally in the name of science. So quite obviously, your mission is to escape before any of that happens. Planet of the Apes is a game that feels terribly generic in its own genre. What it does well, but it does nothing new and unexpected, it doesn't innovate in any way, and what you'll mainly find yourself involved in is running around the stages, some sneaking from time to time, solving of incredibly basic puzzles, and an occasional combat, which is rather simplistic and not too demanding, at least as soon as you secure your first weapon, because when you have none, it's best to avoid it altogether. While most enemies are various apes, none of them behave like they should, and they're basically just very hairy, weird-looking and bipedal humanoid enemies. It would be much more interesting if they could leap, use their tails, agility or environment to their advantage, but it's not the case at all. Worst of all, the gameplay hardly changes throughout the game's entire run, so what you see within the first hour or so is what you'll experience until the end. It is a wasted opportunity that could have been so much better. Graphics and sounds are not great either, especially the latter. Planet of the Apes serves as a plethora of boring and samey-looking locales, repeatable gameplay, and average at best sound design. If you're really into the books or movies, Planet of the Apes may be worth your time. But if it's just another game on your to playlist, then I suggest skipping over it to the next title. While most of us remember 2002's Spider-Man that released in adjacency to Sam Raimi's rebooted movie as the first good game about the wall crawler in a long while, this 2001 Spider-Man was actually not a bad game either. It's also a third-person perspective action-adventure game based on the animated series and Spider-Man Unlimited, as opposed to the newer one that followed the movie. The story is centered around Spider-Man trying to clean his name and uncover the sinister plot behind the mysterious theft that his own and unknown imposter committed, stealing reformed Dr. Otto Octavius's new invention. Spider-Man naturally possesses his iconic wall-crawling powers, which he uses constantly for both navigation and stealth, and he engages in fights with numerous omnipresent buddies. And while most of them are generic thugs, so thieves, gangsters and the likes, the majority of Spider's own, often superpowered villains are present throughout your adventure too, and you need to face them one way or another. And it's these that are the most fun encounters in the game and will often require you figuring out a pattern or a simple puzzle to beat. Other than the enemies, you'll have a chance to meet and sometimes even team up with some other famous Marvel characters, like the Punisher, Daredevil, Human Torch or even Captain America to name a few. What I'm trying to say here, that if you're a Marvel fan and also like action-adventure games, you'll have a lot of fun with this one. Unlike the movie, this Spider-Man stays faithful to the source material and Peter Parker's web shooters are mechanical and he uses them the same way he does in the comics, so for traversal and combat, so you'll need to find cartridges to keep them stocked up. Other than the webbing, you can naturally punch and kick, creating spider combos out of these, and when appropriate, even lift and throw heavy objects at the enemies, utilizing your spider muscles. I once, for instance, utilized my spider muscles, lifted my ego over my head, and then got crushed under its weight and was trapped underneath until after dinner. And you know how I hate skipping dinner. Anyway, all the tasks / missions / goals for you to complete may be different and range from having to beat up different bodies, through seeking keys that unlock something, or races to the target, all the way to escapes from police among others. Point is, the variety of enemies and missions types in Spider-Man will keep you playing and having fun all the way through. It may not be the best Spider-Man game, especially because of the new Sony's outings, which are just incredible, but it's hella fun game nonetheless, and if you like the character or action titles, you'll love it. Grandia II is a top-down turn-based JRPG, mechanically very similar to Final Fantasy games. In fact, it's so alike that if you wouldn't know what you're playing, you could have mixed them both up. The story is set in a fantasy steampunk land that was once a place of conflict between a good deity Granas and a demon Valmar. And while Valmar fell and was killed eons ago, the land still bears the scars of the combat and the prophecy known as the Day of the Darkness that foretells Valmar's inevitable resurrection and return. Even if people have long forgotten the demon and the prophecy, if it wasn't supposed to come true, we'd not had a game now, would we? So naturally, things will happen, all manner of different things in fact, and you will play a key role in all of them. You're a young mercenary Yudo, a master monster hunter hired for an unusual for him job, to protect young priestess of the Church of Granas, Ilena, during a prayer ceremony. Said ceremony is unexpectedly interrupted, however, and this, my dear viewer, is where your, excuse me the lazy pun, grand adventure begins. Same as in Final Fantasy games of the time, the exploration is mostly done on a top-down view map, combat encounters are in third-person 3D view and actually pretty fun. They're composed out of the mostly standard for the genre set of options of standard attack, here named attack combos, special abilities, magic, critical strike, guard, evade and escape. There are no random battles in Grandia II though, which is great, as I just hate them with a passion of a blind painter, and if you manage to approach the enemy undetected, you will gain initiative in the battle, which could mean the difference between winning and losing. Could, but don't, as combat is not overly demanding. The game world is naturally filled with numerous towns and dungeons, and your adventure will take you all around them. Grandia II uses a very interesting and eyebrow-raising party mechanic of not letting you choose your own party members. Instead, they are assigned or removed from the party by story cutscenes, which is not something that I've seen in any other games. At least not something that I can recall now. There are naturally up and downsides to this solution. On one hand, you've no saying who is or isn't following you, but on another, it clearly states your place in the story as perhaps one of the most important, crucial even gears in its mechanism, but still just a gear only. Grandia's presentation was pretty decent for the time, especially on the Dreamcast where it originally released a year earlier, but on PC, in 2001, it was not bad either. Sounds and music are nice and fitting, and overall, the game is a pleasure to go through, and if you enjoy JRPGs at least a little, you'll have a blast. While the Sting's developer may operate under a different name, it is in large part the same set of folks who've made the amazing The Clue a few years earlier. And in most part, it's a very similar game, only raised to 2001's presentation standards. This time, you play as Matt Tucker, a famous master criminal that just got out of the prison where he spent several years, which, at least from where I'm sitting, raises a series of different questions. For instance, how could he be a master thief if he'd been caught and jailed for a rather long time? I mean, sure, there are some scenarios in which these two would not be mutually exclusive. You could have been framed, betrayed, or sold to the cops. But how likely is any of this in a world of crime? Oh wait, I think they call these Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Sunday respectively. So, yeah, very likely it seems. Anyway, you're out again, and since you've no other useful skills, you're back to what you do best. Starting with small burglaries and working your way up job after job until you'll be able to tackle the biggest heist of the game against the so-called Ministry of Light, which runs the entire city. Naturally, same as in the earlier title, each successful job is built upon a few pillars. First of all, research and location scouting, without which attempting anything is pointless. Secondly, the right team, so finding folks with the right skills and getting them to work with you, naturally for the cut of the takings. Third, tools, 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 as different security mechanisms and problems that you may encounter may and will require different solutions. And finally, and most importantly, a plan, without which there are no heists. Same as in The Clue, planning is the most robust, complex and also fun part of the game, as you need to carefully lay out what each of your criminals will do in a given for the heist's time frame, setting it up step by step, action by action. And when all that's done and you're ready, you can launch it all up and from then on onward can only observe how all of your hard work pays out. Or fails, because it's not unusual, especially in the very beginning, when you're not familiar with all of the mechanics to make mistakes. The Sting is fantastic if you give it time and get used to its not too user-friendly controls. because then, when the interface is not one of the factors playing against you, you can finally spread your criminal wings and get lost in its gameplay loop and story. If you think about it and take the game apart, it becomes clear that under the crime-themed surface, The Sting is just a complex puzzle game that requires you to solve each puzzle before letting it play out according to your solution. Sure, it wouldn't have been as fun if the theme was different, but I wanted to highlight the fact so that those who care very little for the Ocean's 11 adjacent themes, that if they're fans of the puzzlers, they will most likely enjoy The Sting too. Independence War 2, Edge of Chaos, not to mistake it with Independence Day, is a first-person perspective sci-fi space story-based shooter/simulation. I know, it's a confusing mess at first glance, but you know what? It kinda fits perfectly. The game is set a century after the events of the first title and places you in the shoes of a son of a miner who was killed by the Mass Corporation's owner Caleb Mass for not paying his debts. Now, a bit of an intermission here if you let me, you do not kill a man for his debts. In fact, you shouldn't kill a man for anything. It's inhuman and most of the time unnecessary. Instead, you can make a man's life very unpleasant, painful or difficult if you have to, to get your money back, have him pay for his crimes or whatever, but killing? Nah, it's just stupid, as it makes the recovery of your monetary assets basically impossible. My deranged observations aside, however, let's get back to our scheduled programming, game previewing. So as it turns out, your father's not entirely gone, as his mind is trapped inside the computer and you'll use his help to enact revenge on the killer. Well, or try to, cause it's not that easy. In fact, everything about Edge of Chaos is rather difficult, but not annoying difficult, more like really challenging difficult. The game world is composed out of 16 star systems that are largely open, and the story is built out of numerous mostly unique missions that will take you all around it. Unlike the first game, it's not all about killings here, you'll also trade and steal. It sounds bad, but futuristic space times are no walk in the park, and a man on a path of revenge has got to find a way to make ends meet until he fulfills his grim task. Along your long-ass adventure, you'll meet plenty of different folks, some of which will stand to oppose you, while others may prove useful or require your help. Fortunately, all of it is dressed in a thick, captivating and often exciting to follow story that you will enjoy learning as you play. And good, cause otherwise the game could have been very easy to drop sometime mid-playthrough. All because of how challenging the later missions are. They are not impossible to complete, nothing of the sort, but may definitely require a few attempts if you're not careful. Luckily, the missions don't feel like series of lazy copy-paste of one another and may even feature dynamically changing objectives, which makes them equally as surprising as they are immersive. If you enjoy space combat, especially based on correct Newtonian flight physics and supplemented with a fun-to-follow story, then Edge of Chaos is a must-play. House of the Dead 2 is what I call my boss's office, as it's as cold as an ossuary. You walk in and the temperature is like at least 5-6 degrees lower, whichever the temperature scale you wanna subscribe to. And it's not only because their part of the office is the only one with the air conditioning, but also because their warm, friendly and inviting personalities keep the temperature there just as much above freezing. It's also a zombie-themed on-rail arcade shooter and a pretty good one at that. A definite upgrade on the first game. It's still a title where the story takes a backseat and is only there to justify all the killings, but it's something you won't care about a lot because of all the fun that you'll be having. So, you're a detective trying to stop a madman who unleashed zombie hordes in an Italian city. Now, why a detective would be the one to deal with it alone is something I do not understand, as it has police or army plastered all over. But since it's you who's in control, I'm sure that you'll do just great. While most of the enemies that you'll be fighting with are zombies and other kinds of monstrosities, and they do come at you at an alarming rate, the House of the Dead 2 is not the easiest of games. Bosses require learning their patterns too, and are definitely designed to be the progress stopgaps, so you'll most likely have to play the game quite a few times before you finally manage to beat it. Interestingly enough, unlike the first game and earlier Virtua Cop titles, the House of the Dead 2 offers a limited multipathing, meaning that at certain points, if the conditions are met, so for instance a civilian is saved in time, you may be able to choose an alternate route for progression. It may not happen often, but it's a nice addition nonetheless and definitely help the game stay fresh for longer. Naturally, it can be experienced with a mouse or a light gun, and while the first is really not that bad, having a light gun is what makes it exceptional. And since I've played it recently in the arcades, I can attest that with said light gun, it's also much more fun. Return to Castle Wolfenstein is a long-deserved follow-up to the 1992's original Wolfenstein 3D and a pretty fun shooter in its own right. It places you in uncomfortable and heavy military shoes of BJ Blazkowicz again, and in another over-the-top scenario where you'll need to face an army worth of no-no Germans. Just to clarify, when I say no-no Germans, I mean a faction that for obvious YouTube reasons shall remain nameless and was responsible for the start and progress of the Second World War. Current Germans are all fine in my books, obviously. So with that out of the way, let's get back to our game. The no-nos, as I will call them from now on, sent their so-called paranormal division founded by Heinrich Himmler on a mission to find the grave of a Saxon warlord Heinrich I and to resurrect him. Your mission, as an unfortunately named hero of Polish descent BJ, is to stop them by means of numerous high-power, high-speed projectiles delivered straight to their brains. Sometimes with a knife too, but you should stick to ranged weapons if you only can. Not gonna lie to you here, while the story is definitely out there, it's only there to provide a background, a reason for you to do all the shooting and get to the exit of each stage. Well, it was very similar case with the original, so it's hardly something complaint-worthy. Most enemies that you'll face against will be many different no-nos, but among them you'll find an occasional undead creature here and there too. The arsenal of weapons at your disposal is era-appropriate and mostly realistic, so having a Luger, MP40 submachine gun or a Mauser with a scope is nothing out of ordinary, and you'll quickly learn to appreciate them, as the knife alternative does not guarantee a long survival. That said, if you've played Return to Castle Wolfenstein as it originally released, you know very well that its story campaign was only there to serve as a sort of a training mode for the super fun multiplayer, which naturally was the main selling point of the game and something that most FPS gamers at the time really enjoyed. Especially that the map making scene was pretty lively, and other than the excellent built-in maps, there were dozens of others available for download. Upon its release, Return to Castle Wolfenstein's graphics and sounds were excellent, and the game truly felt like a modern, near next-gen title. And since the level design was fantastic, the presentation made scouring all those dimly lit with candles or torches and covered in cobwebs corridors feel very atmospheric. The original 1988 spool of Radiance was way ahead of its time. It was the first official computer adaptation of AD&D rules, first title in the Gold Box series of SSI's fantasy party-centric role-playing games, and a first so well-made and polished tactical turn-based combat title. Now, by today's standards, it is a very rough game and it's not the easiest titles to play in 2024, but by 1988 it was like looking into the future. Future of video gaming experiences where real-life RPG campaigns could be played out from the comfort of your own chair and with you leading all the characters in your party. A lot of firsts, if you ask me. And the game, in a no small way because of all that, quickly became a beloved all-time classic. So, seeing a 2001's follow-up Pool of Radiance Ruins of Myth Drannor release was something many of us looked forward to. And most of us who did were then promptly disappointed. Some more, some less, but the game definitely was not what most counted on. While on paper Ruins of Myth Drannor looked like a potential amazing game being based on much newer 3rd edition AD&D rules, using faithful to the original turn-based combat, serving over 100 different spells and a huge ass areas to explore, it failed. And it failed in nearly all that I just listed as potential perks. The turns were so slow that most hardcore fans of the combat mode were falling asleep left and right while playing, or dying of old age. Sometimes both, falling asleep and then dying. The 100 plus spells were an excellent idea, and we have plenty of games like that today, but the interface didn't make it easy at all to operate them, and a smaller, more rounded up set could have been easier to use. And finally, large areas were simply just way too large for this incredibly slow game. So having them vast meant watching your party slowly crawl through them step by step without any way to speed it up. In fact, you couldn't even click on far off point on the map to direct them there. You had to move literally screen by screen, which made something as insignificant in other games as traversal a chore in this one. To be clear, Ruins of Myth Drannor is not the worst RPG or even game out there. It's an average title, it just never delivered on what the fans of the original hoped for. And since it was not exceptional at anything, it was quickly forgotten. Story-wise, 10 years have passed since the original Pool of Radiance, a source of evil, was closed. But since the evil cannot be stopped forever, a new one opened and a whole manner of different evil creatures crawled out of it, flooding the once famous and peaceful city of Myth Drannor. A group of land's greatest heroes, sent to fight against the creatures and to try to close the pool, failed. And in a last-ditch effort to survive the onslaught of monsters, opened a portal to escape. Sadly, that first fail was not their last, and they were killed before they managed to go through. The portal, however, happened to open near your team of Braves, so giving it a very little thought, all of you jumped in and took stopping the pool and evil upon yourself, all to prevent the destruction of Myth Drannor from spreading. The idea is fun, but the gameplay mechanics aren't so much, so it's up to you to decide if you want to invest 100-ish hours into this title. Project Eden is a very unusual and surprisingly fun first and third person action shooter / puzzler. Yes, these two genres are mixed together here, and while this shouldn't have worked as it doesn't sound like something that would, they somehow do, and Project Eden is a rather unique release. You control 4 characters at once: Carlton Dorlan, who can interview suspects and open locked doors, Andre Herderman, who can use his special Omni tool to repair broken equipment and machinery. There's a lot of broken stuff all around in the game, and it's done via minigame, so it's more fun than just watching animation play out on its own. Minoko Molensky, that can hack into terminals to access information, also done via a fun small minigame, and she can also control different robots and machinery remotely. And Amber Torrelson, who can shoot pulse laser bolts and missiles and is resistant to environmental hazards. And it's with use of skills of these 4, you have to solve dozens if not hundreds of puzzles and complete your mission. What mission is that, you may wonder? Well, let's start at the beginning. In the far-off future, when the Earth's population has grown so much that there's hardly space to contain all humans, gigantic skyscrapers are constructed to hold everyone. Well, truth be told, only high and middle class folks. Lower class, no one cares about in the future, and they are relegated to living at the very bottom, below the towering all-around skyscrapers. And since the contrast between the comfortable life inside and inhuman conditions outside is quite high, hardly anyone ever goes down. And the only time anyone does so willingly is when the buildings require maintenance. And this is one of those times. To solve a technical problem with one of the towers, a team of specialists was sent, and as quickly as they went down, they disappeared. So the Urban Protection Agency, UPA for short, sends their agents to investigate. And you, my dear viewer, are in control of said agents. While many of the puzzles may require use of specific skills of one of the agents, some may have you utilize 2 or more of them at once, making for a very fun and always interesting puzzling experience. Each level is a separate floor filled with many different problems to solve, and with each one completed, you're going lower and lower in the tower until you finally reach the bottom and uncover the game's mystery. First half of the game splits combat and puzzling in a way that favors the latter, and the second switches it up. And while the enemy designs are quite interesting, especially the late enemies, I feel that the game could have used with a bit more storytelling and less shooting. In fact, I'd risk saying that the combat is totally unnecessary, especially that death is not permanent and you can't really fail at the game if you really wanna complete it. But it is what it is, and Project Eden is fine the way it is, mixing shooting and thinking more or less equally. And if you're a fan of the puzzlers, it will not disappoint. How do you find 2001's gaming so far? Are these 10 games something you remember and had fun playing back in the day? Or maybe there's something that you've never even heard of? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too. It helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.